Yeah. Let's go to our books on page 5. And we want to talk about the Great Commission. Now, we will look at Matthew, which is one of those common verses that is always quoted. But we want to introduce another way of looking at it. And we want just to take a little bit of time to think through it. And this is borrowed from the life of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ himself. Friends, as a youth worker, I made many mistakes simply because I just decided to do things by default and to do things my own way. Now we are looking at page 5 and we are on session number 2. Now that pyramid, you will also find it a little later on page 63. But you don't need it to turn there because it is just the same pyramid. But looking at the Great Commission for teens and young people, there is a Great Commission that we always refer to in Matthew chapter 28. But we thought it is good, especially for the ministry that we are involved in, specifically to look at how Jesus ministered. And why are we looking at how Jesus ministered? Because the way Jesus ministered had a lasting impact. And that is one of the reasons why we are even here today and saying, can we retrace and get back to the way Jesus himself ministered? And in our books, if you look at our manuals, it provides for 7 steps. And we want briefly to examine those 7 steps. Let's look at John chapter 1 and verses 14. Let me ask 2 people to turn. Okay, we will have 2 volunteers. One to read John chapter 1 and verse 14. Maybe somebody can even say it off head. Don't quote John chapter 1 and verses 12. Let's use John chapter 1 and verses 14. And then another person to read Matthew chapter 9, verses 10 and verses 12. Timothy, why don't you read Matthew chapter 9? And then Ruth, why don't you read John? Let's begin with Ruth. John chapter 1 and verse 12 as Timothy gets ready.
14. Okay. John 1:14 says, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth."
The Word became what? And when it became flesh, what happened to it? Dwelt among us. What are they referring to? The gospel writer, what is he referring to in John chapter 1? The Word that became flesh. What is he referring to? He is referring to okay. Let's read
Matthew chapter Matthew chapter 9 from verse 10. It says, and as he sat at table in the house, Behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and sat down with Jesus and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?"
Why does your eat with who? So, what did Jesus do? He met people, looking at those two references, he met people where they are. So in that space, meeting people where they are is what you should be able to fit in that gap. Meeting people where they are. Now, that means in Soroti, you need to know where people are. In Kisoro, you need to know where people are. In Mitiana, you need to know where people are. In Thorncraft, you need to know where people are. In Ankole, you need to know where people are. In West Lango, you need to know where people are. In West Buganda, you need to know where people are. In Kampala Diocese, you need to know where people are. And maybe later we are going to ask ourselves, where are people? But maybe let me just give you 2 stories. I worked as a youth worker at All Saints Cathedral for some time. And now youth were defined as those in secondary school. Now that time it was interesting. Those in secondary school, those at tertiary level or university, then the young single working class. Now they also gave me to be in charge of another group that called itself the young marrieds. People who are married but were not yet over 10 years. So that was the definition of youth ministry at All Saints Cathedral. So when I looked around, I realized that I was not even reaching a quarter of the population of young people who came to All Saints Cathedral, because many of them were at the university campuses around Kampala. And then I also realized that there was another group of young people who were in Luzira prison. So Luzira prison has chaplaincy. But I had to join a group, seek permission from the headquarters, and once in a month I would have time of going to interact with young people in the prison, in Luzira. Right from upper prison, where those guys who have been sentenced to death are. Up to today when I enter Luzira, especially those people who are in condemned, I don't need to be introduced because we have interacted and I know most of their problems and most of their cases. And then we had to find a way of now strengthening and getting to making sure that there is a fellowship in every university of young people who are Anglicans. And for me, that was very important. Number one, many other churches had come aggressively, and we are taking young people from the Anglican church. And I am not sure about your area of jurisdiction, but then that time, I saw that if we don't do this, and some of them were actually wrong churches. And so not only did I have to think of a strategy of reaching out to young people, but also helping snatch those who had been taken by wrong churches to come back to the right church. So that was one scenario. So the second one was getting involved with the students in the university. Now you need to begin to be thinking, where are young people in your area of jurisdiction? And then maybe later we should also begin to think, ask ourselves, what are they doing where they are? Currently in Makerere University Business School, where Makerere University Business School has currently a population of about 20,000 students. And they have had it to divide in such a way that there is a morning session, there is an afternoon session, and there is an evening session. Predominantly, the evening session is for working class. But I realized that in the chapel, we hardly have 200 students come. And yet we have a number of Anglicans. And then I realized that a number of them are actually in the hostels. So they come from the hostel, they just come and attend lectures, they come and socialize. And sometimes when there is a function, you find a beehive of young people. But when it comes to fellowship, when it comes to Sunday services, nowhere to be found. And so, went to the hostel. I don't want to tell you the name of that hostel specifically, but I went to this hostel and there was a small Bible study group. So I was going to just encourage those people in their small Bible study group. But before I entered the room, it was on the second floor. Before I entered the room, I found these young people on the balcony, boys. And they were talking all kinds of things. Actually, the story, when I got to them, I found the other one telling his friends, for me, one girl or one woman is not enough. I said, okay. I said, you are really a true African man. Now, he thought I am now part of the conversation. And so the others, even before I introduced myself, just only making that compliment, the others also started to compliment. So as I listened to their conversation, I asked and I said, what danger can you find yourself in with that kind of life? One quickly said, actually, remember, now telling this one who said one woman is not enough, his friend said, but by the way, there is no cure for HIV and AIDS. I said, uh-huh. And so to cut the long story short, I asked them and I said, why don't we go for a meeting here? And because I had joined their conversation and I had given them a listening ear, they accepted. Now what was interesting, this was a group of about 5 boys. Now in the room where we were going, it was a Bible study and it was ladies. So I go with the 5 boys into this room of ladies. But I introduced them and I said, here you may not know, but we have these once a week where you meet as young people and you share some of those real life issues. And like so and so said, and within no time, these guys opened up and effectively they became part of that Bible study group. But because it was a bigger number, I had now to devise ways and means of dividing them and getting now a balance between the males and the females. And then later on I realized that there were actually also a gang involved in drugs, taking alcohol and going to club. And so I organized and we visited Butabika with the help of the chaplain of Butabika. And we visited the drug and alcohol rehabilitation unit. And in the drug and rehabilitation unit, those guys can minister to you because they told us how they ended there and how they don't wish, and they said especially the likes of you. So they were ministered to by drunkards. Remember, this is a group of, and now that made my work very, very easy. Eventually, these guys became part and parcel of the chapel, and I am in touch with them up to this very day. So where are the teenagers? Where are the young people? That question should be lingering in my mind and in your mind. And depending on where they are, how best can we get to meet them? And when we meet them, what are we going to do with them? Sorry. Okay, my signal is weak, but we will get there. So number 2, I want somebody to read for me John chapter 1 and verses 45. My brother doesn't have a name tag. I would have called you by name, but it is okay. John chapter 1 verse 40 to 45, if you can turn there. Good enough. What is going to be projected there, you have it in your book. So let's continue. When the projection comes, it's okay, but let's continue. Yes, John 1, 40 to 45. To 45. Sometimes it is good to have your Bible. That hard copy, it is easier sometimes to flip through. These machines sometimes can be. Yes.
We have found the desert, which is being interpreted as Christ. And he brought him to Jesus, and when Jesus heard him, he said, "Go out, Simon, son of Jonah. Thou shalt be called Cephas," which is by interpretation stone. Then the day following, Jesus will go forth into Galilee, and find a tree, and says unto him, "Follow me." Now Philip was Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip findeth other men and said unto him, "We have found him of whom Moses in the law and the prophets did write, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Moses."
Thank you very much. So what did he do? Verses 40. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the two who heard what John had said. And what had John done? Besides the saying, what had John done? He followed who? Look at the last part of verse 40. John followed who? John followed Jesus. And what was the first thing Andrew did? Was to find his brother Simon and tell him, "We have found." So these guys had found Jesus. So they went for their brother. And what did they do at the end of verse 41? Told him that we have found who? We have found Jesus. And what next? Verse 42. They did what? Brought him to Jesus. So next thing is to do with what? Telling people about Jesus. What do we tell people? Unfortunately, it sometimes disturbs my head. In one of the churches, there was supposed to be a youth conference or something. And I had been contacted to be one of the facilitators. I remember even a poster coming out. Now, while I wanted to confirm details of how the program was going to run, because I wanted to input onto the program how best we could maximize the day, I was actually told that it was called off. And why was it called off? Some of the organizers were involved in the SEC meeting. And now you can imagine. Now sometimes instead of telling people about Jesus, we are preoccupied with politics. Sometimes instead of telling people about Jesus, we are preoccupied with building of the cathedral. Now, I am not saying building a sanctuary is bad, but it should not overshadow, because after building that sanctuary, what are you going to use it for? Come to think of what is happening in some of the countries in UK today. And even some of our own churches, where young people are actually slowly but surely finding their level elsewhere. that is going to put us at a risk. I am not saying building sanctuaries is bad, but there has to be a balance. Because we can invest so much to finish the to finish the sanctuary, and at the end of it, what is it going to be used for? Some places, cathedrals have become white elephants. Some of them have turned into casinos. Some of them have turned into exhibition centers. Some of them tragically have actually turned out to become bars. And that is a little bit very, very unfortunate. Okay, let's look at Acts chapter 2, verses 42. Acts chapter 2 and verses 42. Acts 2 and verses 42. Yes, Papa here is ready, you can read. And then I am coming to my elder, they are the next one. Acts 2:42. What does that tell us? In the early church, that is what they devoted themselves to. And the Bible uses that word devoted specifically. That they did what? They devoted themselves. What picture does that paint? What does that tell us? Most of their time was consumed in those activities found in verse 42. What does that tell us? What was very important in the early church? Fellowship. Fellowship. Sharing together. What is important? Then we should be asking ourselves in our ministry today, what is important? Fellowship. And there is a breakdown of fellowship. What does this breaking of bread signify? Holy Communion. So in addition to the breaking of bread, what else did they do? They prayed. Prayed for each other. We needed to pray for each other. We needed to pray for our country. Today when many members of Church of Uganda, when they want to be prayed for, they go to another man of God or to another woman of God. Now, those of us from Kampala, do you know how many people go to Kakande's church and they get that so-called holy water? Many. Do you know how many people go somewhere in Naguru in the neighborhood of Reverend John Musa? Especially young people. So many. And do you know what Kakande gives them? So-called holy water. That water is going to perform miracles. One time I met the administrator. I didn't know that was the administrator of Kakande's church. So in our conversation, somebody was giving a testimony. And I quickly snapped in and I said, but if that is miracle water, and that church is next to Mulago Hospital. Now, don't go that far. I said if it is next to Mulago Hospital, why don't we get some people to help us get that water? And we take and we empty the waters in Mulago Hospital. And let the water perform miracles. And let people, guys, I don't want to tell you what I went through. But you see, people are there and they are willing to get that water regardless of the cost. Do you know that in some of those churches, for the pastor to pray for you, you pay not less than 500,000 shillings. 500,000 and above is when the man of God can pray for you. Anything below that, it will be the associates. If it comes to below 250,000, it will be the ushers. If it is below, that is below 250. If it is below 100, it is the pastor's secretary who will pray for you. And people are willing to part with any amount of money. Do you know that Jesus told his disciples and said, if you believe, you are going to do greater things than even I did. If you do what? If you believe. Now there is a wave that is taking young people. And I am sure that every church of Uganda, congregation in Uganda, has not been spared this. And that is why this is really very strategic, and that is why this is very important. And thank God our coordinator is here. And I am sure that if we tickled him just to tell us a little bit of what is going on, then you would know how critical what we are talking about is. That we need to tighten our belts in as far as the youth and teens ministry is concerned. There are groups here. Some of us have done a very, very good job. But there are groups here around Kampala who have specialized. The moment they come from upcountry there, they have their own conduits. They just get in here and they are told about miracles. They are told, and then some of them immediately they step in there. They are given responsibility. They are made pastors. They are given all kinds of titles, and they just get swept away. I'm not going to tell you the name, but at one point we had an elder who worked and served faithfully at the provincial secretariat. When his own son joined the university, was taken over by one of these groups. Unfortunately, that young man fell sick and lost his life. And because he had said all kinds of things and they had denied Church of Uganda, that group asked the family to get space in one of the Anglican churches and gave a condition and said, we are the ones who are going to handle the service. Because you, Church of Uganda, you failed. Now don't ask me what happened. That is how sad it can be. So, we are saying, let's meet young people, let's meet teenagers where they are. Now, in my family, I have 2 teenagers and I have 2 young adults. Now, I am caught up in between, and sometimes I am at a loss. I must admit. And that is why Missionary Park told us that this ministry is about sacrifice. And that is why we are told that one of the things that we have to accept is actually to learn. There are some things that we have to unlearn. There are things we have to unlearn. There are things we have to learn. And there are things we have to relearn. I don't know whether I am making something there. So let's meet these people where they are. And then we have said, when we meet them where they are, we need to design and think of a way of ministering to them. We have to think of a way of evangelizing them. And we are going to talk about evangelism in a little more detail later on. Let me not bore you with my stories. Okay. Okay. Let's look at Matthew chapter 22. Matthew chapter 22. Papa, maybe you could read for us Matthew chapter 22, verse 36 to 40. Matthew 22, I can borrow you mine here. It might be easier to flip through these pages. Sometimes those... Okay. Let me volunteer Papa here to read for us. Here, you can borrow mine 22. This is verse 36. You can find it somewhere there. Matthew chapter 22, verses 36 to 40. Thirty-six to 40. Okay, thank you very much. Now, if we get meeting people where they are well, and we evangelize, and when we have evangelized, we bring them to a fellowship. To care in part means to nurture. To care in part means to identify the gifts that they have and you develop them. Some of them are already gifted. So it's a matter of just tapping into some of those. And that is why fellowship becomes very important. And that is why I want to encourage you as I challenge myself that fellowship should be part and parcel of our work. Because when you and I go for fellowship, that is when we are able to see either the need, that is where we are able to see either the talent, that is where we are able to see a gift, that is where we are able to say, let me get to know a little more about this person. And when we do that, what we are reading next automatically follows. What we are reading in Matthew chapter 22 and verses, what will happen? That is now Matthew 22 verses 36 to 40. When we get meeting where they are, when we get number 1, 2, and 3 well, what follows? Number 4 falls in place automatically. When I went to the universities, and then we realized we designed some program for senior 6 vacists. Remember, senior 6, by end of November, some of them, especially those doing arts, are already done with their exams. So the whole of December, they are at home. They will next go to university in August. So you have these people for more than 6 months. And so we had now to work out something special for that group. Now, the ones we had at All Saints Cathedral, whenever they met their friends from the school where they are, and they were in Miracle Center, and they were in Watoto, and they were in... Now, before long, I started to see an influx of young people, and each time you tried to find out where is this one coming from, you would find they are coming from Miracle Center. And some of them left the miracles there, and they decided to come. Some of them were coming from Watoto. Before long, we had a problem of a place to meet, because where they would meet would get full, and they would have to arrange chairs outside on the veranda. Completely full, a very big hall. Now, those of you who are at All Saints Cathedral, the old nursery school, before they partitioned that hall, it would get full to capacity. And those young people would sit even on the veranda. So we had a very good problem. Not of people committing immorality, not of people quarreling, not of people getting involved in drugs, but the problem was now of space. How do we accommodate all of them? And these are good problems that we should be able to deal with. But it depends on how we get number one, number two, and then what we do in our fellowships. Now, we are told that they devoted their time to prayer, but they also devoted not only Holy Communion, but they also devoted themselves to apostles' word, teaching. What did they do? They went back to the foundation. Now, this answers every question. It amazes me how it even answers science questions. It amazes me how it is even mathematical. Recently, I was doing a science course in leadership and governance under Makerere University. And it amazed me to find that actually one of the first theories that they will give you is a theory from the Bible. And then the best leader and the best teacher that they gave and they constantly referred to, even the Muslims themselves, is our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So when we are looking at those steps in the life of Jesus Christ, even the secular world recognizes him. Now what are we doing? Instead, some people are going for orators. Some of people are going for motivational speakers. I don't know whether you have ever met some motivational speakers in some of the fellowships. And that has become a common occurrence. And you see how slowly, systematically, and surely we get derailed. And some of those motivational speakers come and they end up taking the young people because they promise empty air. They promise them heaven on earth, which actually is not there. But when we focus and help young people to pick and get to understand from here. Psalm 1 says what? There will be like a tree planted where? By the waterside, by streams of living water. And it will be a tree for all season. And there is no amount of wind that can shake them and they get carried away. Now, as a church, unfortunately, around that time, so we built a ministry among the young people at universities. We built a ministry among young people in their senior sixth VAC. We built a ministry among young people at secondary school. And the church started to realize a certain wave of growth. But again, as leaders of the church, we were not very, very careful. And we made some mistakes. And some of the young people ended up leaving. And you know when they left, sadly, and my heart is sad, because I can tell you of two churches that broke away from Church of Uganda in the Diocese of Kampala. One is Worship Harvest. The leader of Worship Harvest was a worship leader in St. Francis Makerere University. For your information, there is no need beating about the bush. And so he went with a hollow team. And then they picked a group which was at All Saints Cathedral called the Well Springs. Now the recent breakaway found what they call the font. And predominantly and mainly, again, the youth pastor of St. Francis and a number of young people in All Saints Cathedral. And I mean, I know, because the other one, when he was He came to become a youth worker at St. Francis shortly after I had left, after I resigned from All Saints. And now these ones who joined him and they formed the fund, I know all of them. Just yesterday before I came here, I entered the supermarket to pick something and I bumped on one of them. And for them, they know me as a pastor. And he said, Pastor, I have been looking for you. Where can I find you? I said, you know where to find me. He said, I need to come and we share something. Now for them, they have broken away, but they still consider that I am their pastor. Now that is the challenge. Because even where they are, they realize that they are in a vacuum. So we need to pick this because this helps us to grow the ministry. This helps us to grow the young people. This helps us to grow the church. And that is the only way we can be able to pass it on to the next generation. If we are not careful, if we don't pick number 1, number 2, and number 3 well, we are going to lose it and it is going to die in our hands. And that is why we said, can we re-examine ourselves? Can we re-examine our strategies? Can we re-examine, do an evaluation of what we are doing? Now, this is not to accuse anybody. And please don't go back and begin attacking the archdeacon. I know that in some of our parishes, the archdeacon is also the vicar. Please don't go back and begin attacking the archdeacon and say, you people, you are the ones who are killing the church. Now we have been told what to do, and for you, you are doing nothing. Excuse me. Go back and sit and begin from the beginning. If you and I do our part, if you and I do our part well, sooner than later, time will tell. Okay? Okay. Then we need to do what? Luke chapter 10 and verse 1. What does Luke chapter 10 and verse 1 say? My brother, you can read Luke 10:1.
Luke 10:1 says, after this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them ahead of him, 2 by 2, to every town and place where he himself was about to go.
Now we will begin to realize now here what is the Lord doing now here at step number 5? He is multiplying himself. By appointing others, he is giving them the task of what? Of ministry. And not just only of ministry, he's giving them the task of leadership. And that is why he said 2 by 2. And now you are going. Let me wrap this up so that we can. Now that is the verse that we have all been waiting for. And what will be the result? So when these people in step 5, when they went out, I don't think we need to read this. We all know Matthew 28 verses 16 to 20. Now, where did it start from? Going out of our comfort zone. Now the question I want to ask is, how about those who faithfully come to church? Do we ignore them? What do we do with them? Because your scenario and mine, because of our tradition, is built in such a way that there are people whom will always come to church. So what do we do? Now those ones, we can meet them in church. But when they come to church, what do we do with them? Then when they come, begin from step number 2. And don't just develop that attitude and think, after all, these ones will always come. Excuse me, they will not always come. One day they are going to go, and they are going to go, and they will go for good. Now, I didn't want to bring this, but if you look at the previous statistics, the last statistics of 2024 and the other statistics, overall, what is the fastest growing religion and denomination? Religion and denomination, which is the fastest growing? And the percentage is there at everybody's disposal. Do we know? I am now bringing that because we are talking about multiplication. Do we know? Islam is growing at a supersonic speed. Check the people who are contesting. Okay, just on Friday, they were concluding a meeting of Association of Head Teachers, secondary school in Uganda. Do you know who became for the first time, do you know who became the chair? I don't want us to begin to talk names here, because they will accuse Missionary Park and and Rev J of, but now it becomes a walkover. My wife is a secondary school teacher. She was promoted to become a deputy head teacher. And she was posted to one of the church-founded schools in one of our dioceses. I escorted her with another clergyman. We got there, and the head teacher, instead of looking at the deputy who has been posted, kept looking at me and the other clergyman. And after we introduced ourselves, and my wife gave him the letter, after reading through the letter, he sat back on his chair and he told her to the face, "There is no place here." She said, "But the ministry did a survey, and the reason why I was sent here is because this is a church-founded school, and the population of girls has increased." He said, "But I have told you, I am the head teacher." And then he very quickly added and said, "Before you say anything, take that letter back to whoever gave you and tell them the head teacher has said there is no place here." And we said, "But at least indicate that she has reported." She said, "No, you just take it back to whoever gave it to you." Friends, I had to plead with this Muslim man in a church-founded school. I had to really plead. And then reluctantly, he accepted to endorse and said there is no place, and put his signature and put the date. But before we entered, talking to the secretary had told us that the deputy was in Chambogo. So I happened to have the number of the deputy. So I called the deputy, said, I have the stamp, but I am leaving here very late. So I said, please don't leave before we come. So because the head teacher had appended his signature, now on that letter, so we went to get the stamp from the deputy, and then we took that letter back to. Now don't ask me what happened. Now we are not talking about schools here, administration of schools, but we are just challenging ourselves and saying, how do we ensure that we grow? Now I am talking about number 4 and number 5. Yes, my brother.
I got some opportunity. I'm Reverend Charles Odiope from Soroti, and I'm the Chidikonagist chairperson, patron. I happened to sit with one Muslim and was telling me 3 things that they are targeting. One of them, that you find today Christians, most of the Christians talk of producing 2, 3, 4 children. But for them, that's not the case. They marry many women, they produce many children. They don't mind, but their target is to make a rapid growth. They are producing many children. Then number 2, they are planting churches, mosques. Even if they don't have any Christian in that place, their target is to do what? Yes. They plant churches, they are mosques everywhere. Then number 3, what they are doing today is to have some activities that will cause the attention of youth to come. Issues like putting some schools, then they maybe put some, they don't even tighten the school fees and all that. Their target is just how to make other youth come and what? Come to their schools with that minimum fees that they can accord to our children. And also their target is to targeting our families, our daughters, our sons. They target our sons and daughters to go and join them. And the competition that we have today is basically on our ignorance. We are looking at how to tap these children, these people from where they are. For them, they don't just organize a fellowship, but they will put some other fun, like there's a competition, like they are giving out some gifts, like they are giving Bibles, like they are doing this. You will find people go. And when they go, they spoil their minds. And they find at the end of the day, most of our youth are joining them. My request is, these people are just targeting on our weaknesses. Where we are certain or whatever, they come there, they bring routine activities that is continuously running. But for us, we reluctantly don't look at that what? A problem. So that is my concern.
Thank you very much. We are talking about growth and multiplication. That while we are comfortable, we are being overtaken slowly but surely. know what happens? We are talking about some of the things that we do. And you check how the next year that teachers are actually going. I don't know whether you do that. Yes, teachers don't see other people, but they are not Christians. They are not, but they are teaching people to see other people. They are looking for. Ask.
Which is being better than the church. But now you find in that school, contract with the master. How do you handle that experience?
So is that the school? Is that the school started by the church? Is that the school started now? Because according to the laws of the church mosque, now, according to the laws, okay, according to the education act, I mean, it's there on the website. That's popular, you can find it, okay? It gives all the rights and the responsibilities to the foundation body, including appointing the board, not the chair board.
6 members.
Yes. That is by law. That one we don't delay. So, again, it comes into number 5. We look at it as ministry. Have we addressed the leadership question? Because then that is the person responds their way into leadership. And then, like he say, using the data as a strategy, and we told people, now when we construct the best here, we are going to take one another and count the other one. And so everybody says, hallelujah, our prayer has been answered. So, that is my thinking that maybe we can still have a conversation so that because there was no way, there was no way it wasn't to come and begin the construction of them. There was no way. Where was the leadership of the church?
But then, I think some time back, the Muslim became chairman board. That is how the mistake.
Now that is what we are talking about, that now the laws of Uganda do not allow a person of another faith to be a chair of the board in a church founded school. Actually, so the problem is our own. And so now, my brother, now that we are here together, don't go and begin blessing the bishop and telling him that you are speaking for the archdeacon, okay? We are only saying, can we now go back and say, this is not right? And how can we? And maybe some people need to go and train as a leader, so that becomes ministry for them, and then they can give guidance and leadership to the church. Yes.
Just confirm what that is my place for the electrical school. All along, we have never had that kind of whatever. Though they are given that is that's what we got like that. But when the Muslim teacher was closed, one, so two around 2 to 3 teachers who are Muslims being included in the school.
bought the land where the school was built. And yet that school was bought by the CMS by then. Now, by the time they were still struggling with the Catholic, the chairman board was appointed as the Muslim leader. Now, by the time the chairman board was a Muslim, that is the time that they also brought the mosque and built. Before we knew it, the mosque was already done. By the time when we were asking what has happened, the chairperson board was a Muslim. So idea that is the message. So if you don't really look at this at the professional level, you see the way of backing up schools within regions with some of the documents. Because we know that many of these documents that we have, like the church land, like the school land, most of them are quite
Negate and go into discussion about education. But what we are saying here is that where young people are, there are other groups that are active. And some of them are actually derailing them. And that is why we are saying number 2 is very critical for you and for me. If there is any way we are going to survive, we have to do number 1, number 2, and number 3 very well. And then we will begin to see number 4.
No. I think what I said was like, those are already references we have. And already known as, I think the people we are here now, we are going to ask ourselves, so how do we strategize? We can keep those things in our minds and now begin to look at the way forward.
Thank you very much. So let's get to look at these. Now, the idea is, can we get a broader picture of that? Now, because people have gathered for a SEC meeting, I don't think any right-thinking person should go and begin preaching because you are a youth worker. So you say, you guys stop what you are doing, let me first preach the gospel. Now there you will be in a wrong place. Now, we have to think, even when we are talking about meeting people where they are, you need to understand and know what they are doing there and the dynamics there, so that you become relevant, so that you have an entry point. But also through that entry point, then you will be accepted, then you will be welcome. Or you will be able to sell what you want to market, the product that you have. And so when you finish meeting them where they are, then you do the evangelism, you care, you nurture and develop, and automatically growth will take place. And as growth takes place, you need to put a leadership structure in place. You need to have leaders in place whom you have grown, whom you have nurtured. And then you are able to multiply. And by multiplication, what do you do in number 7? You again now, you had Jesus commission and send out his 2 by 2. And he sent up to 72. And when you read later, the outcome of that was massive. Okay. So, let me go back to the other pyramid. Okay. Now, we have already gone through this. So these are 6. It is only returning to number 1 here, which is not taken care of here. But in other words, when you have reached the tip, when you have reached the apex, you should be able to commission the team that you have grown to come back where? And then you continue the cycle again and again until you have left no one. But what this pyramid now introduces are two other things. Number one is what? And then the other one is? Now there has to be a clear distinction. Sometimes we get caught up running events, and sometimes we call that ministry. No wonder for long, I don't know whether in your churches you had something called jam. It became so popular that every church had a jam. And people would go there, Jesus and me. But do you know who has ever participated in a jam or organized a jam? Because I realized in Kampala, most of the jam, now this is an abbreviation, and it is a good abbreviation. Jesus and me. But most of it was full of very loud music. Most of it was full of what? And then on some occasions, it involved a bit of eating especially snacks. And then there would be soft drinks. I don't want to say that there would be alcohol. But at the end of the day, people would have sweated, people would be very tired. And if you asked them what they had learned, there would be nobody preaching the word of God. So everything else was done. Young people were brought together, but there was no evangelism. And now, interestingly, another church would organize a particular, what I saw in Kampala, another church would organize the same event. And they would get the best performers from Church of Uganda and take to their church to perform. And they would tell them, we want a partnership with you. And you would not see that group again. Because the others would sweep and take them away. Now, can we begin to think of programs so that you have a bigger picture? Rev J, would you want to say something about programs and how they work, especially in this context?
Thank you. I'll say very brief because we'll probably even delve more into that later on. But I was asked to write on my table, on my paper, that all these are activities which have a goal in mind. A goal in mind. For example, if you have that jam, Jesus said it's usually a concert. Jam is usually a concert. Where people come and play loud music and dance and they sweat. That is just an activity. But the question is, what is the goal of that activity? Because the goal is what will give meaning to that activity. Are we together? Many churches, like Francis said, will have many activities to do this because it's exciting. Oh, we've done this because it looks nice. Oh, we've done this because it's say. But the question is, why are you doing it? What will change it from just an event to a program is answering the question, why? Are we together? By the way, you can say, for us, we don't have a concert today, and the reason we want to have a concert is just for people to have fun. That is your why. You have to be very clear on your why. So if you want to just have fun, don't bring a boring speaker. Okay? Don't bring boring music. The goal is changes it from just an event into a program is the why. Now, you will notice also, by the way, as we go along, there will be things, activities that you will do here, which add into this, which add into. So, if I do, let me give, he's talking about meeting people where they are, okay? He has talked about the jam, okay? The jam is a gathering of young people, right? Look at the jam as a gathering of young people. Now the question is, why want these young people there? The problem is not the jam, the problem is that why do you want them? So if you want to put evangelism, get someone who is excited, because this is an exciting time. Don't bring someone now, brothers and sisters, young people, the gospel. No, you have changed the meaning of the event. You're close. So get someone who Jesus loves you, and they'll be excited that they see and they hearing the gospel. But you're not ending here. Remember, there is a goal. Everything is the why. The why. And that, my friend, is turning from just an event into a program. Are we together? But we'll talk more about that later on.
So we are going to have a session where we are going to pick, if you will get it in our books as we go along, that each of these, be starting from the real base here, meeting people where they are, evangelism, fellowship, all that has a specific session, and we are going to go into details. But let me give you an example. We thought of how do we continue to reach out to young people, and especially those in institutions of higher learning, post-secondary. And we decided on a strategy of taking young people to the beach on Entebbe Road. We decided to go to, not Entebbe Road, but actually in Entebbe, Iro Beach. I don't know how many of you have heard or know that place. Iro Beach. Now, before going to Iro Beach, I first took those in senior 6 VAC to one of the beaches around Garuga. And the idea was just to help them to see what goes on in the beach. But also the other reason for it was, when they join the campus, when they join the university, and somebody comes and tells you, I want to take you to the beach. Do you know what goes on in the beach? Have you ever been to the beach? And many parents don't care about this. So just to prepare these young men and these young ladies about any eventuality, I took only those in their senior 6 vacation. And we went. So we went in the morning. First things first, we had our fellowship. We had Bible study. We prayed for different prayer requests. We even had lunch. Now in the afternoon, because I knew what happens in the beach, in the afternoon from about 2, groups started coming in. Schools started bringing their leaders who were handing over new leaders, they started coming there. And then there were these people who were coming, one coming with a member of the opposite sex. And then you could see that they are really up to only wickedness. So after we had lunch, because we had a public address system and a few items, so I told my people, when we are going to the beach, none of you should go with a swimming costume, because I am not allowing you to go into the water. All I want you to observe and watch what is happening there. So after lunch, I told them, now you are free. Don't go into the water, and don't go to secluded areas. Go to areas where there are people and watch from a distance. And then by 4:30, because I wanted us to leave at 5. So I said by 4:30, we should all gather. Now, given that time, 4:30 up to 5 was a debrief. You come and report what you have seen. And you needed to hear how disgusted these young people were. So after I realized that the lesson has been driven home, And remember, even the Bible study that we organized in the morning was actually pointing to some of the things that derail young people. And now that was a point for me to nail home and said, now your parents are releasing you to go to the university and you are going to find yourself in the hostel. And you are going to find all kinds of rogues in the hostel. What are you going to do? And you are going to find all kinds of offers from sugar mummies and from sugar daddies. And they are going to offer you to go to a disco. They are going to tell you to go to the beach. What are you going to do? And some of them resolved from there that if it is not organized by the fellowship, I will not go to the beach. Period. And for me, that was a score. So I used them during the holiday. So we organized what we call the beach wave. Now the beach wave is where we went to Iro Beach. Now we booked the whole Iro Beach and we took young people, I think it was about 7 buses. We took them to Iro Beach and we had a good sound system. So we mounted it there. Immediately, we didn't allow guys to go with the swimming costume. Immediately we asked them to prepare for us lunch, and because we were a number, they only prepared for us. But of course, their patrons came who wanted you to swim and who wanted you to drink. And then we mounted music there and we started a worship session in the sun. I mean, you know that there is a lot of sun around the beach. And we worshipped and praised God. It paralyzed the beach. And some people, even before the altar call was made, were asking, how can we become part of your group? And one young man confided and said, I am tired of my life. I am here trying to pass time because I am alone. He had other people he came with, but he said, I am lonely. And he shared his life, what was happening. Now, sometimes we think that there is a lot of excitement where people are, but they are lonely. They are in a group, but they are lonely. Life no longer has meaning. In the end, what did that help us? It cost us a lot of money. A lot of money. But we were able to rescue a whole lot of guys who went to the university, because for them then, out of that experience, they decided we are not going to go into club, we are not going to go into some of these events, we are not going to go into that. Now, that is where it becomes very important that what is it, whenever we organize anything, what is it that we want to achieve? What is what? The big what? What is the big picture? What is the big picture? And that is the only way we can sustain the Christian faith. That is the only way we can grow the church. And that is the only way we can remain. You remember Reverend Gerard was telling us that for me, I am here to stay. I am not moving from youth ministry. Back last. Now I am older than the Reverend Gerard. But as to whether I am okay. Reverend John Musa, stop laughing at me. So, let's go back to our manual page number 5 so that we can draw this to a conclusion. Now, the question then becomes who? Okay? When we are, remember in the pyramid, if you look at your pyramid, looking at programs, stroke events, and also on the other hand, looking at relationship. Now, the church has to provide a base and a basis. What the church therefore has to come out clearly what it stands for. So that then we are able to build those relationships, so that we are able to draw programs. And out of those programs, we can have activities that feed into those programs. And by the time we finish those activities, we have achieved the big picture, what we had at the back of our mind. When we took young people for the beach, we called it a beach wave. We called it a beach wave. What did it help us to achieve at the end of the day? We rescued the lives of our young people who joined the university because they didn't accept. You know what happens, their life around those hostels and the freedom that university students have. I work with the university, and in the university, once you bring your child to the university, in fact, the university is not interested in you, the parent. No. The university is only interested in your child, not you, the parent. Sometimes even when you come that you want to see the results of your child, they may not even allow you access to it. Unless really there is a problem. And so one of the things was, how do we rescue and help our young people? Now, the other one, therefore, is what? It therefore means that we have to build a leadership team. And we can't exclude the family because the young people depend on their parents. And some of them have to go back to school, and most of them, especially in secondary, have reported back to school today. So, looking at that pyramid, that black picture, we have to develop a program for every level in the pyramid, beginning from the base, that longer part, meeting people where they are. You also need to have a program of how or where to meet people. Then a program for evangelism. Then a program for fellowship. Then a program for how will you manage the growth. And how do you continue and keep it going? And so you should be able to answer how. Now, because you are meeting people where they are, that's about relationships. And then you have already answered that question of what? Of the Great Commission. Please, let's take note of this. Now, this does not mean that we are saying what you are doing, throw it away. We are saying, can we reorganize ourselves? We are saying, can we go back first to the drawing board? And for each of these, Ankole has a magnificent children's sanctuary. In fact, as you enter the diocese of Ankole, you can mistake that to be the cathedral. Now, all the children whom they are going to churn out of that children's ministry, where are they going to end up? Because it may not be automatic that, because by the time they finish their children lifespan, they are supposed to transit into the teens or into the youth, depending on wherever. Again, how do we handle so that not only are we going to address the issues in that pyramid, but also on the different age groups that we have where? In the church. Because university students need a different program. In fact, that is where I am actually struggling with PAYSCO, because by the time of PAYSCO, these guys are actually deep into exams. And so university students are left out. Now, I am not saying PAYSCO should stop, but I am thinking that maybe we need to begin to think of another program specific for university students. And the time that can be best suitable for that might be between May and August, because then they are actually on a break. Maybe immediately they break off, because most of academic years end around the time of May. Why don't I shut up my big mouth? Unless you have a question, maybe only one for now. But because because some of the questions I am hesitant, will best come when we are dealing with each of those things in that pyramid, as you will see in our manual, okay? So if there is any question that we can answer later, well and good, but yes, my brother Joshua. Now you are really going to ask. Okay, you ask. Yes. Yes. Mm.
To me, I would think that if I have raised someone in the Anglican Church, I evangelize to them, got them to be part of the fellowship, I grew them, they became leaders, and then time came, and they became the fold, or they became worshipers. I want to think that to me, I would have achieved that is actually multiplication, because in time, they are reaching out to quite other people that I, as a parent, may not have been able to reach out to. So I would rather, I would look at it as
Why I wrote it the other way is that there was a decent or dissatisfaction of sorts. Okay? Now, currently in the Church of Uganda, one of the strategies is church plan, where if that growth has really taken place, the multiplier effect should be church planting, and then you remain as part of the whole. But this one was a breakaway function. So that is where I have a point. That there was dissatisfaction with the mother church.
like we did in the Catholics.
But we will talk about that as we get to that. Now, the first one really is that, I mean, you can see how this is big. Okay? This is big. So, that is where we are supposed to begin from. Okay? Because if we lose the people where they are, we have lost it. If we lose people where they are, we have lost it. And unfortunately, like he said, there is where it is happening. Young people say it is happening, especially around the Kampala. This way it is happening. And they all want to be where it is happening. And so because in the church, it may not be happening. So they can't come to church. So you have to go to where it is happening. If I use the language of the young people. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you. Let's appreciate him. I just want to add, to answer the first question, this is just a process, okay? It's not that this is the most important, because depending on, and this is something we're going to deal, I'm going to help us go through later on in the day, maybe in the evening session, that we need to evaluate where our ministry is, okay? Because when you evaluate your ministry, you may realize that you are very good maybe in this area here, but not very good up there. Okay? Or you will realize you have a lot of leaders, but they are not doing. All right? So we will get, but this year provides for us a process to follow, because as you see, it is, as my brother said, it is the people at the top, at the very center, who you will be going out to meet people where they are. You understand? So it is a cyclic, it is continuous. All right? But we will get there. So just to answer your question, it is not a law. This is just a process that will help.